Hi everyone, my name is Veronique, and 5.5 years ago I had viral encephalitis, which resulted in acquired brain injury. Now, this nasty brain inflammation completely flipped life on its head, no puns intended here. So one day I was a super active mom of 3 boys, a social butterfly, an exercise fanatic, and the next, I was truly struggling with some of the most basic tasks. Now, part of my role today is to bring a patient's perspective, and I'll do so by sharing a snippet of my experience navigating the health system in the context of brain injury recovery. So with no further ado, here we go. So most of you here today would agree with me saying that brain injuries can be very complex in nature. Our brains are like supercomputers, right? They're constantly trying to make sense of what's going on around us and within our body. They'll use information such as your heart rate, your hormones, our breathing patterns, our blood pressure, and they'll also use feedback from our gut, our senses, our thoughts, and our actions. And they'll cleverly piece all of that information together to regulate our bodies. Now, when a brain injury occurs, one or various parts of the brain that gathers all that information may have been bruised or damaged, which see things going a little bit wonky. However, when it comes to the brain, nothing works in isolation. Everything is connected. So if an area of the brain has sustained damage, there's a high chance that it will have a flow-on effect on another part of the brain. The next slide will show you some of the symptoms that I had to learn to navigate and manage following my brain injury. As you can notice, the list is rather long, and unfortunately, many others recovering from brain injury also have to tackle such an impressive list. And then there are the challenges that no one mentioned or warned me about. Whether it comes from the damage sustained to an area of the brain, or whether it comes as secondary reaction to all the life changes that occur post-brain injury, I personally definitely wasn't prepared for the mental health struggle that would come hand in hand with brain injury recovery. On one hand, I saw my sense of identity in life as I knew it had changed overnight. And on another, I saw factors such as anxiety, trauma, PTSD, depression, fear, and loneliness enter my life and have a profound effect on myself and my family. And my experience isn't unique. Many others within the brain injury community share this sentiment and feel that that health professionals too often leave the mental health component of brain injury recovery unaddressed. Yet, being able to tackle and resolve mental health issue plays a huge role in moving forward in a world that is significantly different, in a world that presents challenges and limitations that I sure never had to navigate beforehand. Our physical health can have a huge impact on our mental health, but our mental health can also have an important effect on our physical health. So asking the right question as a health professional can bring a lot of value in restoring a person's physical, mental, and overall well-being during brain injury recovery. As you'll be able to notice from the following slide, I saw many specialists throughout my recovery. Yet, you may be surprised to hear that only a couple asked the hard questions when it came to mental health. So over the last 5.5 years, I've become a firm believer that brain, body, and mind simply cannot be treated separately. One of the questions that was asked when submitting my presentation was, what do you think healthcare providers need to know to support their patients and family? So my answer is pretty twofold here. I think it's important to acknowledge that support comes in different shapes and sizes at times. So feeling heard and addressing the hard issues such as mental health can go a long way in changing a patient's way forward and outcome. A comment I often hear from people around me and health specialists was based on what they could see. You look well. And don't get me wrong, that's always very, very nice to hear, but it truly wasn't a reflection of everything that was going on inside of me. Think of the whole iceberg analogy. Just as the core of an iceberg, many of the brain injury symptoms are invisible and hiding beyond the surface. I'll give you a few examples. No one can see through my eyes, which means no one can experience my blurry vision or my blind spots. If my heart starts racing and I experience a panic attack, no one else feels the physical and mental effect it has on my person. One more example. My experience has been that it's also pretty hard for people to understand what it feels like when the world around you stops making sense due to sensory overload. As a person recovering from a brain injury, I don't expect everyone around me to understand the extent of what's going on. And I don't expect my health professionals to have all the answers. But I do want to be heard, and I certainly do not want to be made to believe that all my symptoms are a fiction of my imagination. Everything is connected, right? Which means that a brain injury can trigger a cascade of changes, which can in turn lead to the body becoming dysregulated. And that's when we're likely, to have other physical and mental health be affected further. So the next question is, where do we start, right? Well, we typically tend to the biggest fires, and that is very valid. But it's important to remember that all the pieces of the puzzle eventually need to come together one way or another. So let's explore and lean more into a holistic approach from early on in recovery. Let's consider less traditional ways to manage inflammation, to help a patient restore their gut health, to identify how hormones may come into play. Let's talk about how each piece of the puzzle can go on to increase their overall level of energy. And why not explore how trauma may be slowing down their healing, and how things like mindfulness, meditation, exercise, and nutrition could be supporting the body, brain, and mind as it is recovering from a life-altering event. I've come to learn that there's no magic pills to fix brain damage, right? Recovery occurs through implementing a combination of various tools and practices and sheer determination. Brain injury recovery is a roller coaster. And in order to maintain a positive mind frame, I sure had to build resilience. I had to process trauma. I had to think outside the square, to look at other options and opportunity to support my brain, body, and mind at each step of recovery. It's definitely been the biggest mental game I've ever had to play. Whew, okay, so that's lots taken, right? And I'll be the first one to admit that brain injury recovery is indeed a very complex puzzle. Everything is connected when it comes to the brain. And to maximize recovery, we do need to make sure that a patient's physical and mental health is covered in order to maximize their overall brain health. And most importantly, avoid seeing them develop other conditions further down the track. I certainly do not have all the answers, but I know that we are all important actors of change in shaping the future of brain injury recovery. The way brain injury recovery is approached is slowly changing, and that's really reassuring to see. And everyone attending this virtual conference has a role to play in implementing changes, even small changes, that will go on to improve the quality of life of people like me and their families as well. So on this note, I would like to thank you very much for listening in, and I hope that we'll be able to work together on bringing all those pieces of the puzzle together going forward. Thank you very much.